Hello, you little gangsters. Are you ready to find out exactly what is the Black Cat in Gangster Granny by David Walliams? I know I am. Let's not waste a moment. Let's get started with Chapter 9, Black Cat. Ben stared at his granny as she stood by the jeweler's shop dressed in all black. Ben, she prompted, what are you doing following me? Ben was so shocked he couldn't form a sentence. Well, she said, whatever you're doing here, you'll have the cops on us in no time. We'd better get out of here. Quick, jump on. But I can't. Ben, we've got about 30 seconds before that CCTV camera comes on. She pointed to a camera screwed to the wall of an apartment block next to the row of shops. Ben jumped on the back of her mobility scooter. You know when the CCTV cameras come on? He asked. Oh, said Granny, you'd be surprised what I know. Ben looked at her back as she drove. He'd just seen her preparing to rob a jewelry shop. How could he be more surprised? Clearly, there was a lot more to his granny than he had ever known. Hold on, said Granny. I'm going full throttle. She violently twisted the handles on the scooter to absolutely no effect that Ben could feel. They hummed off into the dark, going about 3 miles per hour with the increased weight. The Black Cat? Repeated Ben. They were finally back sitting in Granny's living room. She had made a pot of tea and laid out some chocolate biscuits. Yes, that's what they called me, replied Granny. I was the most wanted jewel thief in the world. Ben's head was exploding with a million questions. Why? Where? Who? What? When? It was impossible to know what to ask first. No one else knows except you, Ben, continued Granny. Even your granddad went to his grave not knowing. Can you keep a secret? You have to swear not to tell a soul. But, Granny's face looked fierce for a moment. Her eyes narrowed and darkened like a snake about to bite. You have to swear, the old lady said with intensity. Ben had never witnessed before. Us criminals take our oaths very seriously indeed. Ben gulped, a little scared. I swear not to tell anyone. Not even your mother and father, barked Granny, nearly spitting out her false teeth in the process. I said I swear not to tell anyone, barked back Ben. Ben had been learning a lot about Venn diagrams in school recently. As he had sworn not to tell anyone, and let's say that anyone is set A, then Mom and Dad are obviously included in set A, and of course, a subset of it. So there was really no need for Granny to ask Ben to swear a second time. Take a look at this handy diagram. Set A, anyone. Set B, Mom and Dad. But Ben didn't think his granny would be interested in Venn diagrams right now. Since she was still staring at him with those scary eyes, he sighed and said, All right, I swear not to tell Mom and Dad. Good boy, said Granny as her hearing aid began to whistle. On one condition, ventured Ben. What's that? Said Granny, seeming a little startled by his nerve. You have to tell me everything. Chapter 10. Everything. I was about your age when I stole my first diamond ring, said Granny. Ben was astonished, partly at the idea that Granny had ever been his age, which seemed impossible, and partly because of the obvious fact that 11-year-old girls do not usually steal diamonds. Glitter pens, hair clips, toy ponies, maybe. Diamonds? Definitely not. I know you still look at me with my Scrabble and knitting, and my fondness for cabbage, and I am just some boring old dear. No, said Ben, not entirely convincing. But you forget, child, that I was young once. What was the first thing you stole? Said Ben eagerly. Did it have a really big diamond on it? The old lady chuckled. Not so big. No, it was my first. I've still got it somewhere. Go into the kitchen, will you, Ben, and fetch the Silver Jubilee biscuit tin from the shelf. Ben shrugged as if he knew something about the Silver Jubilee biscuit tin and its incredible contents. Whereabouts is it, Granny? Asked Ben as he left the room. Just on top of the larder, boy, called Granny. Chop, chop! Your Mummy and Daddy will be wondering where you are soon. Ben remembered that he had wanted to rush home for cheesy beans and sausage. Suddenly, That seemed colossally unimportant. He wasn't even feeling hungry anymore. Ben re-entered the room, holding the tin. It was even heavier than he remembered. He passed it to his granny. "Good boy," she said as she rummaged through the tin and picked out a particularly beautiful sparkler. "Ah, yes, this is it." To Ben, all the diamond rings looked pretty much the same. However, Granny seemed to know each one of them as if they were her oldest friends. "Such a little beauty," she said as she brought the ring up to her eye for closer inspection. "This is the first one I stole, back when I was a nipper." Ben couldn't imagine what Granny would have been like young. He had only known her as an old lady. He even imagined she had been born an old lady, that years ago in a hospital when her mother had given birth and asked the midwife if it was a boy or a girl, the midwife might have replied, "It's an old lady." "I grew up in a small village and my family were very poor," continued Granny, "and up on the top of the hill was a grand country house where a lord and lady lived, Lord and Lady Davenport. It was just after the war that we didn't have much food in those days. I was hungry. So one night, at midnight, when everyone was asleep, I crept out of my mother and father's little cottage. Under the cover of darkness, I made my way through the woods and up to the hill to Davenport House." "Weren't you scared?" asked Ben. "Yes, of course, I was. Being alone in the dark woods at night, it was terrifying. There were guard dogs at that house. Great big black Dobermans. So, as quietly as I could, I climbed a drain pipe and found an unlocked window. I was a very little girl at 11, small for my age, so I managed to squeeze myself through a tiny gap in the window and landed behind a velvet curtain. When I pulled back the curtain, I realized I was in Lord and Lady Davenport's bedroom." "Oh, no," said Ben. "Oh, yes," continued the old lady. "I thought I might just take some food, perhaps, but next to the bed I saw this little beauty." She indicated the diamond ring. "So you just took it?" "Being an international jewel thief is never that simple, young man," said Granny. "The Lord and Lady were snoring heavily, but if I woke them I'd be dead. The Lord always kept with a shotgun by the bed." "A shotgun?" asked Ben. "Yes. He was posh, and being posh he liked hunting pheasants, so he owned many guns." Ben was sweating with nerves. "But he didn't wake up and try to shoot you, did he?" "Be patient, young man. All in good time. I crept over to Lady Davenport's side of the bed and picked up the diamond ring. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. I had never seen one up close before. My mother would never have dreamed of owning one. 'I don't need jewels,' she would say to us children. 'You are my little diamonds.'" I wondered at the diamond in my hand for a moment. It was the most gorgeous thing I'd ever seen in my life. Then suddenly there was an almighty noise. Ben frowned. What was it? Lord Davenport was a big, fat, greedy man. He must have had too much to eat earlier because he let out the most enormous burp. Ben laughed at Granny, and Granny laughed too. He knew burps weren't supposed to be funny, but couldn't help but laughing. "It was so loud," said Granny, still chuckling. She mimicked. Ben was helpless with laughter now. "It was so loud," continued Granny, "that I was startled and dropped the ring on the polished wooden floor. It made quite the bang as it hit the teak, and both Lord and Lady Davenport woke up." "Oh, no." "Oh, yes. So I grabbed the ring and ran back to the open window. I didn't dare look behind me, as I could hear Lord Davenport cocking his shotgun. I leapt down onto the grass, and all of a sudden the lights of the house came on, and the dogs were barking, and I was running for my life. Then I heard a deafening sound." "Another burp?" asked Ben. "No, a gunshot this time. Lord Davenport was shooting at me as I ran down the hill and back into the woods." "Then what happened?" Granny looked at her little gold watch. "My dear, you had better head home. Your mummy and daddy will be worried sick." "I doubt it," said Ben. "All they care about is stupid ballroom dancing." "That's not true," said Granny unexpectedly. "You know they love you." "I want to hear the end of the story," said Ben with frustrated. He was desperate to know what happened next. "You will, another day." "But Granny—" "Ben, you have to go home." "That's not fair." "Ben, you must leave now. I can tell you what happened when you come another day." "But—" "To be continued," she said. And we will be continued with Chapter 11 next time. Cheesy beans and sausage. Sounds kind of gross. All right, guys. See you next time. Do your best work. We'll see you next time for Cheesy Beans and Sausage.